uncivilized versus civilized, right? Which is always endemic to the messaging that came through. I've mentioned to you before about I love listening to old radio shows. Sirius XM has a radio classics channel, and I listen to the old radio shows, and there's that narrative of the civilization coming in to bring their wealth and their prosperity, and also their Christianity in many cases, to come and civilize the uncivilized world. And yet in science, when we talk about a country like my country, we have one of the oldest civilizations, that continued civilizations on the face of the planet. So science calls it civilized, a civilization, a rich heritage, proud heritage of Aboriginal Australians who have existed on that continent for tens of thousands of years, long before the white men came. Science calls it civilized, and yet the narrative was that after we settled the colonies and we did all that, we are under threat by this uncivilized population that comes in and threatens our existence. And so there's that story that still pervades these radio shows. American Indians, the savages, they use these terminologies intentionally. And so you can imagine as having back in those days where that was the only media, right? Today it's Facebook. Right. Back then it was the only media. Young children and families gathered around the radio in a quaint little ceremony of coffee and sandwiches and listened to this. And it codes, and it's coded into the brain of the people. So it's no surprise. Then it continued into detective stories. Yeah, the same narrative, the same process where there were bad people, and we have to put them down. And but in a lot of cases, it just was the same sad old story. So whenever we see, which is playing into the fear, and of course a lot of politics today is really leveraging, ratcheting the fear up, because of course we're only coming from our lizard brain reactions to that it is successful. I mean, it's not, I mean, people say, well, it's very clever of them to do this. It's not clever. It's actually, it's just basis. That's all the tools they've got, is fear and threats and aggression. And so that's interesting.
But Brett, also to take it back before we take it forward. So the colonial invasion of Australia, the killing, the imprisonment, the enslavement of the Aboriginal originals, which is basically the same meaning, or the fact that the Native American on film, as soon as you saw them, they were going to kill you. If we look now and take that up to 2020, you just see how ridiculous that was. And then it's the white savior. But all of this, it was a business plan. Slavery was a business. The colonial exploitation was to get raw materials at the cheapest possible price, take them somewhere. So if you look at Britain 150 years ago, 200 years ago, Britain's bread hung by a thread. It was all about textiles. Could you get cheap cotton from India, the Americas, and Egypt? Bring it over in oak ships sailed by the great merchant navy, get it into semi-slavery in places like Manchester, where people worked in hideous conditions, by the way, that you can find in many, many countries around the world now. And you went from a raw material to a finished material, and then you shipped those materials out to the rest of the world for profit. And that's what built this insignificant wet green island into a superpower. So it was colonialism, it was muskets, coal, oak trees, navigation, and this business model, this business plan. Slavery's gone around for tens of thousands of years, but it was taken to a very sophisticated level, a systemic level, and that's where the business plan happened. So right now, there is an economic gain in maintaining this. So if you like, it's an economic prospectus. That's what we're hearing in the news. That's the defense. It's fairly pitiful. By the way, so today we had Barclays Bank, we had Royal Bank of Scotland, which used to be the biggest bank in the world and was basically took over NatWest Bank. These were slave finance banks. They said that they would be making restitution. You're thinking, well, they certainly can't afford to do that in these troubled times. And then we looked at the numbers, which were insultingly small. So when slavery ended, there was a big compensation check paid. And for those of you who don't know, it wasn't paid to the freed, it was paid to the former oppressors in terms of financial compensation. Everyone was complicit in slavery. I'll say that again. Everyone was complicit in slavery. So it was compensation. So these places had plantations in Dominican Republic or wherever it was, and they got this money. And then the main newspapers today have recorded this. In today's value, that would be £400,000. So whatever that is, $500,000. Listen to this. So this is the biggest bank in the world at one stage. That would be one repossessed studio flat in London. That's what they're going to pay. That's what they're offering today in restitution and compensation for slavery. Are you kidding?